is so bad. Wisconsin played some really low-scoring games because they have a very bad offense and a good defense. One thing I would say is that Nigel Hayes is a good player for Wisconsin, but if you look at his numbers, I'm a little concerned at the amount of three-pointers he's been taking here lately. He's shooting 28% from three-point range this year and 40% on twos. So Nigel Hayes is missing a lot of shots here. I think they'd be a lot better off if he was down in the post doing some more work with his back to the basket. This is a guy that is very talented, has a bright future, but he's been taking a lot of bad shots here lately. Bronson Koenig got hot last game or else they'd be out of this tournament already. Ethan Happ's very good down low. He's only a freshman. I didn't realize until the other day that he was related to Jay Happ, who plays baseball. But Bronson Koenig, warmed up. You've got Ethan Happ inside. I think Nigel Hayes is a real key to this game to play better than he has been. I think he needs to. On the other side, Notre Dame, Notre Dame's a bad defense. Like I said, they're actually 172nd in the country out of 351 teams, according to KenPom, as far as defensive efficiency. This is a team that really gives up a lot of wide-open threes, so that's one to watch there. I think Notre Dame's very fortunate to be in this spot here. I think Stephen F. Austin outplayed them last game. Stephen F. Austin kind of froze up at the end of that game and tried to burn the clock a little bit too early. Notre Dame got very fortunate to win that one.
I think so as well. And this game, if you dig hard enough, it can become compelling. But on the surface, for me, it's certainly the least interesting of the four tonight.
Yeah, I think from a watchability standpoint, it's the least interesting. You look at the Pittsburgh and Wisconsin game in that first round. That was the ugliest game I've seen in the NCAA tournament so far. I had Wisconsin in that game, and they ended up winning. I felt a little bit fortunate to win that game because they were losing most of it. But, Wisconsin, one thing you have to remember, some people say, well, Wisconsin makes it sloppy and somehow won the game. Well, that's how Wisconsin wins every game. Wisconsin wants it to be sloppy. They're not looking for stylistic points. So, don't be surprised if they get a sloppy win again here. I think if I had to pick a side here, I'd take Wisconsin. I don't really like either side very much. My only premium play tonight is on the total in this game. But, Mike Bray's a decent coach, but I don't like that bad of a defense, especially on a neutral floor. And I think Greg Gard's done a really, really good job with this Wisconsin team. I don't think he's even gotten enough credit for the job he's done here. So very slight lean here to Wisconsin.
Look at the next game here between Gonzaga and Syracuse. It's unfortunate. Last year you were so heavy in Gonzaga from a futures standpoint, and then this year it looks like the year they're going to make the run.
Yeah, Gonzaga is a team that really underachieved throughout the course of the season. And then now they get in the postseason and they play the kind of basketball that people were expecting them to play, throughout the course of the year. It's pretty hard to imagine now that they got swept in the regular season by St. Mary's. And now here they are, two dominating performances in the first two rounds. Their defense was dominating in the first round against Seton Hall. Their offense was tremendous against Utah. I know I've said this before on here, but Domantas Sabonis is a tremendous player. He's going to be a very, very good NBA player. I like his skill set a lot. I think the unique thing about this game is Syracuse's zone against Gonzaga. Sabonis, he has been playing tremendous basketball. There's two ways to look at this. Syracuse's biggest problem on defense is they can't get a rebound. And a lot of people see this the wrong way when they look at Syracuse. A lot of people say, well, Syracuse is probably going to give up a lot of threes because they play that zone. If you look at Syracuse's zone is very good at defending against three-pointers. Teams are shooting only 30%. That's 11th best in the country. Why is that? Well, that's because Syracuse is really pushing that zone out really high. Opposing coaches always talk about that quite a bit, that Syracuse plays this very aggressive zone to where they push that zone up way higher than most zones would play. That makes it very hard to get a defensive rebound. Syracuse is almost at the very bottom in the country in getting defensive rebounds. So I think Gonzaga's best offense here could be offensive rebounds, where they are pretty good to start with. I think Domantas Sabonis could get a lot of offensive rebounds. The other thing I would look for is Gonzaga should use Domantas Sabonis in the high post a lot. His skill set would do very well there with the basketball. He's very quick for his size, and also get some high-low action going. I think that would help a lot. And obviously they want to get some open shots for Kyle Wiltjer, but Domantas Sabonis, the best player on this Gonzaga team by quite a bit when you consider his offense and his defense. And Syracuse, I think Syracuse is very fortunate to be here. Obviously you have to give them credit for being in the Sweet 16, but their matchups getting here were very fortunate. Gonzaga is my lean here, -4.5. It's a little bit higher price than I was thinking this one would be. Honestly, this is one where I was thinking I was going to take Gonzaga. I was thinking I might be able to get 3 or 3.5. 4.5, a pretty big difference, so I passed on this game. Still, my lean is Gonzaga here.
Well, in the late one between North Carolina and Indiana, you've got two premier programs. This is a matchup that the NCAA really wanted, whether it was North Carolina or against Kentucky or North Carolina against Indiana. I don't think that the executives really cared because this is going to be a pretty big ratings monster for a Friday night, even though it's a late tip. So going to be a lot of people invested in this one, and I don't think it'll disappoint.
No, I mean, this is the game I'm most looking forward to as far as watching a game. This is really an interesting game. If you look at the public betting numbers right now, the public's about 60% on North Carolina. Also, the public's pretty decent here on the under, about 60%. That surprises me. The line's gone down a little bit from 160 to 159, 158.5. Indiana, it's going to be interesting to me to see what Indiana does in this game because Indiana in the past has played relatively fast, but Indiana slowed things down here late in the year. They're using up almost 18 seconds at the shot clock. At least they did in Big Ten play. They played relatively fast against Kentucky. North Carolina is 15th fastest in the country, using only 15 seconds of the shot clock. It's going to be interesting to see if Indiana wants to run with North Carolina. Indiana has a very good offense, extremely efficient on offense. 5th best in the country at 3-point shooting, 5th best in 2-point shooting. So, and they're also 15th in offensive rebounds. If you look at North Carolina is not very good at threes, 307th in the country, 22nd in 2-pointers. They're 4th in the country, though, in offensive rebounding. And I think that's the single biggest key in this game is the rebounding margin. When you're handicapping this game, look and see who you think is going to win the battle on the boards. North Carolina usually does the most damage when Bryce Johnson's getting those offensive putbacks. Not many teams in the country better at offensive rebounding than North Carolina. Not many players in the country better at offensive rebounding than guys like Bryce Johnson, Isaiah Hicks, and Kennedy Meeks. So I think that's a really big key in this game, and I think I have to give some credit to Tom Crean. I mean, I've been pretty low on him in the past. He's done a good job with this Indiana team. They've certainly gotten a lot better throughout the course of the season. I think if I had to take a side here, I'm going to take North Carolina and lay the points. I don't love that one. I also think that if I had to take a side on the total, I would probably take the under. And I know that seems a little bit strange, but actually both of these teams have been playing pretty well on defense here lately, and that's an awfully high total for an NCAA tournament game.
Well, and you see the sharper money kind of pushing the total down a little bit, and of course the public's going to come in late and play the over. So if you are interested in taking the under, obviously you want to wait until closer to tip-off to do that. And I think it's really interesting you brought up the point about how Indiana has improved defensively throughout the year, along with being more efficient offensively. I'm glad that we have this matchup, but it does seem after Indiana's played 2 games and after stacking up their resume and all that, this was a very underseeded team.
Yeah, it seems that way. The Big Ten didn't get very much love. The Pac-12 got too much from the selection committee. I think that regardless of what happens in the rest of this tournament, there's no doubt the selection committee made a lot of big mistakes here with this NCAA tournament, with the seeding and then also who got in and who didn't. Indiana's defense got a lot better when James Blackman got hurt. And really it was an addition by subtraction thing because Blackman was a really good scorer, but on defense he gave almost no effort. And, that really helped their defense quite a bit. Throughout the course of the year, Indiana has solidly been rising throughout the KenPom defensive rankings. They're 57th right now, but earlier in the year they were below number 100. North Carolina's 12th in defensive efficiency on defense. This is a North Carolina defense that is better than most people think. That's why it's a little bit tricky to play over-unders with them because they do play so fast, but their defense is so good that the other teams have to slow down against them.
Well, it should be a good night of action to be sure. I want to touch real quickly here on the 2 Elite Eight games that we know about. Oklahoma and Oregon, this one a pick 'em. Some money coming in on Oklahoma here initially. And then Villanova, Kansas 2.5-point chalk for that one. Any thoughts on either of those two games?
I actually forgot to say one thing. I did play North Carolina -130 to win the region last night. So that's a free play that I played as far as the future. I think -130, pretty fair price there. I got that at 5 dimes. I'm not sure exactly what that is right now, but I do like North Carolina's chances to get past Indiana. And then they'd certainly be a pretty big favorite in that next game as well. As far as these Elite Eight matchups, I think that the Oklahoma and Oregon game is really the one that interests me the most because Oregon played really well last night against Duke, and Duke was certainly overrated based on what they had done in their first couple games in the tournament. And the odds makers have to give them some credit because the public's going to back Duke no matter what. There was a lot of sharp money on Oregon last night, and Oregon ended up being the right side. The one thing that really strikes me about this Oregon team is that Casey Benson is a lot better than most people think he is. He's a point guard for Oregon who just distributes the ball extremely well, doesn't shoot it very much, never turns it over. And I think a guy like that's really nice to have when you have Dylan Brooks, Tyler Dorsey, Chris Boucher, guys like that. You have a bunch of guys on the team that are really good scorers, and you have a really good distributor in Casey Benson who really doesn't get much credit. He's a tremendous player for that team. He doesn't need to shoot it very much to be effective. Shoots at 37% from long range, so if you leave him wide open, he'll make you pay. I think he's a really underrated player for them. Oklahoma, obviously, last night they played really well. I think Texas A&M was just not that good of a team. Oklahoma shot 44% from long range, so it didn't really bother them that they were in a bad shooting backdrop yesterday. But the Honda Center isn't a good place for shooters. Oklahoma was only 4 of 9 from the free throw line, so you wonder if that had anything to do with it. And Texas A&M was 13 of 24. So in the Honda Center, I always have a little bit of a lean with the under. As far as the side, that one's a tricky one. I think that the Villanova and Kansas game, if you're looking at that one, it'd be hard for Villanova to shoot that well again. Extremely hard for them to shoot that well again. And you're playing against a Kansas defense that is really good. Kansas's defense is 4th in the nation in defensive efficiency. Kansas has played the 6th toughest schedule in the country, according to KenPom. Villanova is actually, let's see, as I'm looking as I'm talking, Villanova's 22nd. So a decent difference there in the schedule that they've played. And Villanova lost some big games on neutrals early in the year and on the road. Villanova lost by 23 to Oklahoma on a neutral. My lean in this game would be Kansas, just because I think Kansas is a lot deeper team. Kansas also is a really well-balanced team. They can go inside, outside. Perry Ellis was tremendous last night in that game against Maryland. Really dominated that game. Kansas has a bunch of different guys who can do that. I think Kansas is the more well-rounded team, and I think that, this is I know Cole Ryan says the what goes up must come down thing in the NBA, and I think that Villanova's shooting percentage has to come down after last game.
So we got about 50 seconds or so left streaming live for our live listeners. Please grab the archive version of the show here. We're going to talk about the Vegas 16 to wrap up this week. You've got Tennessee Tech, Old Dominion, Northern Illinois, UC Santa Barbara, Oakland, Towson, Louisiana Tech, East Tennessee State. Those are your 8 teams in the Vegas 16. They couldn't get 16 teams. We'll see if they do next year. But first impressions of this field.
Well, my first impressions of this field are there are some pretty decent teams in this tournament. Oakland probably the best team in this tournament. Oakland really goes out there and schedules the non-conference up. Greg Campy does a really good job with that team. Kay Felder, tremendous, definitely the best player in this tournament. And UC Santa Barbara, another good team in this tournament. The Gauchos played a lot better down the stretch, and they have a very veteran team. One of the things I like to look for in these smaller tournaments is how much experience the team has because, obviously like we've talked about in the past, it's really important to see how motivated a team would be in these tournaments. And I think the really experienced teams are more motivated. So I think teams like Oakland and UC Santa Barbara would be very motivated for this tournament.
Well, we've got lines available for all these games. Old Dominion, an 8-point favorite against Tennessee